Alrighty, I am here today with George Salas, who is the short-term rental king. He's got some of the coolest Airbnb properties I have personally ever seen. I love your story, right? You immigrated from Peru and made something out of yourself, definitely pursued the American dream. So, George, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here today.
Jeff, well, it is my pleasure to be here, and I am honored for the invite, man. Thank you very much. Super excited to drop some nuggets, talk some shop, talk some real estate, man.
Absolutely. Well, let's start off with your origins, right? So you were born in Peru, right? And then you immigrated here when you were at a young age.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I was born in this small town. There was maybe 70, 80,000 people. The name of it was Tarapoto, right? In the jungle side of Peru, the Amazon Valley. Then we moved to the capital for a year or so, and then parents got a divorce now that was maybe 6 years, 5 years, and then I went back to this town. So from 6 to 15, I lived in this small town, and I pretty much grew up there in my infancy. Parents got a divorce, and it was hard. It was hard. Half of our house had collapsed, and I lived in half a house, and it was just it was a third world country in the middle of an Amazon Valley town on a hill. So that'll describe it, and it was fun. I mean, I knew nothing, but I loved playing soccer, so that was a start, man.
Nice. Yeah. I've actually been to Peru. It's a gorgeous country. Got to
Beautiful.
see Machu Picchu, all the tourist stuff, all the classic stuff. But man, it is a really, really cool country.
Yeah, man. There's lots of unexplored wonderlands down there, man. Yeah, I went down a couple years ago, and I spent a whole month. Went to visit my father and took our son. He was 9 months at the time. We had a blast, man. Traveled 4 or 5 different cities. It was awesome.
Nice, nice. So what drove you guys to move to America?
Well, Mom wanted the best for us, as it is. Land of the dreams, or the American dream, right? And she looked for something, so she was able to find a person she got along with that visited her, and a couple years later they ended up together, and then a few years later ended up married, and I guess 2000 is when I moved over here, to Houston. So been here ever since, and I love it.
Nice, nice. So you guys moved to Houston, and then what was your first like entrepreneurial endeavor? Like, did you just get right into real estate once you left high school?
No, man, I didn't have the mindset to do that. Absolutely not. You know, um, Take you through a 30-second. I worked in retail. I was always a people person, but I was shy in my early years. And believe it or not, I came out of the shell. I call it maybe like 20 years old, but I did retail. I did service industry. I was a waiter, bartender, and then I started working into. This is when I was really getting like, hey, I should do something entrepreneurial. Maybe age 21, 22. I had the urge to just go bring the people that I had influence with into events. So I started doing these events, and I loved to hang out. I was always out there with everybody. And then, I put together events, and I started an event company. That was my first entrepreneurial, it was more like a solopreneurial venture. I did that solo probably, with another guy probably for 3, 4 years. Then in 2013ish or 14, I turned it into a real company. So I was maybe 5 years, so 2007 to 13, so 6 years, sort of just solo, right? And I had no skills, just my drive. That's it. Real estate didn't come until 2018.
Nice. I can just hear from how you're talking about it. I can see why short-term rentals made sense because you're the event guy, the experience, everybody gathering together. So that's is that kind of what drew you to short-term rentals when you finally did take the jump into real estate?
I would say no. The experiential side of short-term rentals that we focus on now, which is creating experiences, was an evolution, just like any entrepreneur venture or an entrepreneur becoming that person that can deliver that result, right? Or that can create XYZ. At first, for me, it was just about getting into something other than being in the event business. This is 2018. Just to give a brief summary, I had come off an investment venture in which was I was an LP, and I had invested over $300,000 out of my own cash. In addition to that, I had some from my retirement that I was saving at the time. So over 150,000 into one big project that fell to the ground. I was an LP on the deal, and I was a marketer, lost everything. So I was rock bottom, had to start from zero in 2017. Yeah. So the
Wow.
venture,
Wow.
yes.
So
Hmm.
how did you recover from that? Because a lot of people when they hit rock bottom, they give up or they pivot so hard that they just never go back to entrepreneurship again. So how did you pick yourself back up from that?
Man, that is a long answer to that question. That's a great question. I had the drive. I still have the same fire. Now, I would credit all of it to just the entrepreneur fire inside of me. That's when you come from nothing, a third world, and you see that you can build something or you can become something. There's a fire inside you, and I don't know if I'm speaking to you out there, as an entrepreneur, as an investor, to your audience, but you know that you can be better than what you are now, and you've got a path to that, and there's work. So I discovered personal development in 2018, and that was the spark. Reading books, seminars, attending conferences. I've started in 2018, and I haven't stopped ever since. I was at one 2 weeks ago. So I do about 10 to 15 masterminds and conference events where I travel to every year for the last 4 years now. So since 2021.
So just those are strictly to just develop your skills, develop your mindset, invest in yourself, that sort of thing.
Every area of my life, right? So investing, biohacking, right? Personal development, health, all of the above. I attend them all, right? So it just you got to do it strategically. Otherwise, I would live on the road.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Do you do any mentorship now that you've kind of gone past the initial stages of pulling yourself up? Do you look back to people who are in that stage now and try to help them get to where you're at?
So that's a great question. I am in several masterminds, as you and I obviously met in one, right? And I mean, I've done coaching and I've done consulting for many years. I try not to do too much. I do have a couple clients, and they'll, work with me, once a month or whatnot. But I am just way too busy with the bigger stuff, the bigger deals. So I love teaching, and because I've been through so much, and I love just that fact of being able to really just teach someone else what I've learned. I've been through tons and set rock bottom a couple times. So um, yeah, man.
Do you find that that makes you better at what you're doing now? Because they always say teaching is the best way to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer to that, Jeff, I think, is that when you're teaching, you're actually creating a much better understanding of whatever topic you are teaching. And that's just how it is, right? Because you become more cohesive, you understand the steps better, and your brain works that way, right? So right now, I work with different fund managers, and when I walk them through the onboarding and I talk to them, like I'm actually teaching them a lot about how our real estate operates, our fund operates. But so that's teaching also, but I obviously don't charge there, right? But I love that part, and I am starting, probably a internal group, on like a leadership group, that I'm not charging. I just want to be able to connect with a lot of people. So I'm probably in the next few months, it'll be me showing my leadership AI skills, right? So that's in purpose of just keeping connection with people, right? With
Nice. We can get into the AI later because you and I are both obsessed with it, and this will turn into a 10-hour episode. But I wanted to touch base on the Airbnbs that you have because I'll be honest, most people that I know have an Airbnb. It's a vacation house they really wanted, and they're just trying to like justify it as like a quasi investment.
Mhm.
That's not what you do. I mean, you've got dozens of them, and you were showing me pictures last time we spoke, and I've never seen anything like it. They're houses with basketball courts, pickleball courts, pool, like all at one house. I mean, it's just incredible. So, how
Mhm.
did you get into that, and what did the first one look like?
Oh man. I I was just getting started into real estate. This is 2018. I'm broke. Okay. I know real estate and I thought fix and flipping was the way to go. So I started going to conferences. This is end of 2017, beginning of 2018. Conferences, workshops, those 3-day workshops, and boom, 4 months later, I get my first deal. This is February of 2018. 3 months later, I'm doing 3 or 4 fix and flips renovations. I was buying these Harvey properties from the hurricane, flooded homes, completely flooded. Oh my God, worst decision ever. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm spending hundreds of hours. Like I was working 70, 80 hours a week, driving, meeting contractors. I was the GC. No investor mindset, right? I was just grinding. Then I figured out what wholesaling was, right? And then that's also a lot of grind, right? Wholesaling real estate. And then middle of 2018, I just, hit a home run on 3 wholesale deals. I make $62,000 in 1 month. And I'm like, man, I wish there was just something more consistent, more predictable that would just come in, like, man, I wish I had access or I was able to figure something out. And I ran into this lady that mentioned something about renting an apartment for like $1,000 and actually bringing in $2,000 to $2,500 per month, and I'm like, what? You could do that? And you can list this thing on this platform called Airbnb. This is April of 2018. Okay, this is when I first heard about it. By August, I had rented 10 apartments, all 1 bedrooms, for $800 to $900. And within 2 miles of downtown Houston, by the end of that year, I had 20 leases and I was turning 2 or 3 of my fix and flips into short-term rentals. By the end of 2019, which is right before COVID, I had 40 plus, maybe 42 or 43, and 37 of them were these 1 to 2 bedroom apartments, mostly 1 bedrooms. So I loved it. And it was why, to answer your question, cash flow. I wanted cash flow, and I saw that I could create, $500 to about $750 per door, which is more than, a single family home makes, in 1 month, in today's market. But I was like, wow, this is awesome. I had no idea. I had no idea of the rest. So that's how I got started, man. It was just out of need.
You said something that I really relate to. So you mentioned you had a really good month. You made 62,000, and your first thought was like, man, I wish I just had something stable. And if I feel like people who are entrepreneurs get this because when you're growing your own business or you're doing your own thing, money in the bank is not money to go spend. It's like months that you can keep doing what you want. Like it's like buying yourself another couple months to keep trying. Is it's almost how it feels sometimes because you're going to need that money for something else, so you don't just go spend it. So is that kind of what you were feeling at that time? It's like, hey, I'm wholesaling, it's going well, but I never know when the next deal is going to come, and I
Mhm.
need to start putting this somewhere. I don't need to spend it all today because I don't want to work this hard the rest of my life. I want to start putting it in something that's more passive.
Yeah, so wholesaling, as you know, and doing real estate transactions as an agent, which I'm not, but just referring, or even fix and flipping, you've got to spend a lot of time into each deal, and then wait 3, 4, 5 months for each deal to close and sell, and sometimes even more, right? So for me, getting my hands on $62,000, in 2018 was it was a nicer chunk, and I was like, hey, how can I make this work for me? And my juices were flowing. I was reading a lot of books at the time, as I do today, and I just needed something more consistent. So I went and invested it, and it was the investor. I wouldn't say investor. I was just getting started then, but I would say more the entrepreneurial mindset to try to get out of the hustle, because wholesaling and fix and flipping is a lot of hustle, right? You got to be grabbing the property and then selling it. So that was sort of the big transition there. Like, I need this, we've got to do it, and what should I do with this? I'm educating myself, but I found this one thing that I thought would be fantastic, and that's how I got into it. There was no vision of experiential at the time, or no long-term vision of creating a fund or building $100 million portfolio. None of that. It was just that moment.
So you went from 1 to 42 units so quickly. How did you scale your operations? Like, how did you keep your head above water on all that?
Oh man, I was working 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was, I mean, my first year of real estate, I made $319,000 in gross revenue, and I lived on 20,000. So I reinvested a lot. Some of those fix and flips didn't work, so I did lose money on a couple of the deals, right? Terrible, terrible deals, full flooded homes. And then the rest, I just reinvested into these short-term rentals and just, building up the business, more marketing, and then by the end of 2019, I had figured out that I needed to leave everything else and just focus on what was, creating cash flow.
Right. How much better would you say you are today at spotting a deal that you really want and that you're just confident in, as opposed to when you first got started? Like, how much more confidence do you have in a deal now?
100 times more, because I first always look at the numbers, right? The numbers don't lie, ever. The numbers are going to tell you the true story. The numbers on the real estate value side and the numbers on the short-term rental analytics platforms. So I just look at the data. So data creates confidence. Now, without looking at the data, I already know what kind of properties are successful and what kind are not. So I can scan any property in anywhere in the world and tell you in 5 seconds if this could be a killer, 30% of your purchase price and revenue per year type of deal or not, right? And now, I mean, depends on each market. I might be wrong, but when you have that instant, it's all just based on experience, right? So instincts in your gut instinct just tells you a lot. Usually it is correct.
And to anybody else listening out there who wants to get into this, it's not like anybody can spend 30 seconds and make sense of an Airbnb deal. You only can do that because you've spent years doing it, right?
Yeah, I look at a deal, I look at some parameters, probably about 10 things and 10 parameters on that deal, right? And I could tell that quick. It's experience. You can't trump experience with anything, so
Absolutely. What are some of the biggest things you look for?
in short-term rentals, I look for the large size of the rooms first, right? Looking if it's updated or not. And it's okay if it's not. It's just more work and I've got to buy it right. I look at the amenities, what amenities are already there. Is there a pool, a hot tub? Does it have views? Or what space is there that I can put amenities? I look at the size of the lot. I look at the size of square footage of the property. And I also look at the size of the backyard, right? So for me, these are ways that I can add value, right? And even if I don't do it immediately, which is most people just start, maybe doing certain things to their property. But if you set yourself up for success in the long term, you can gradually build that success one step at a time in the short term, right? You don't have to necessarily spend $80,000 on a backyard to make, a property do 180,000, 170,000. You could start if the bones are right and the foundation is right, you can gradually move there. So now I just like to go straight for the, for the top of the mountain now. But that I didn't want to at first. I was scared. I was, I had doubt. There was no clarity there. I was afraid that I would fail. Okay. So that's why I went with the smaller units. Imagine someone getting started out there, they want to do this actively. They have no idea what's coming, right? It is insane amounts of work, especially if you're doing smaller units. Now you take the same units, the smaller units, and you put three or four into one, so you can make the same revenue of three or four, five units in one house that you make in five smaller units. Gradually, I gained the confidence, with experience to be able to go hit these bigger targets. And I'm sure you have too.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because you want to be. It's almost, but what I've found is that there are more people in that boat, that there's so little in comparison. There's a lot less competition on the bigger, easier deals because there's fewer people going after them. I can't tell you how many times I meet people trying to get into real estate. Just they keep going after duplexes just to do a, vanilla buy and hold rental, and they hear about a mobile home park or an Airbnb and they're like, I'm just not ready for that. It's like, well, at some point you got to just get on the horse and you got to go for it, right? You can do as
Yeah,
much research or partner with someone like you who's already done it before that you can learn from or just work with or something like that.
absolutely. It is a little nerve wracking to jump into those types of deals immediately, unless you either hire an expert, right, a consultant, a coach, or you partner with an operator that has already done it. And man, just having the accurate data, because I also looked into these data sites back then, it just I didn't get 100% accuracy on the numbers. When I first got started, like one of my first houses, I thought I would make $100,000 on it because per year in revenue, because there was a property right down the street, about maybe 3 or 4 blocks that was doing that, but I missed maybe 8 or 9 things that property had that mine didn't. Right, so experience can really, really make a big difference there.
Right. Right. It's a lot of intangibles. Like with I do in mobile home parks, it's all pretty simple. You can just write it down. It's all numbers. With what you do, it's a lot more creativity, and I could see how important experience could get because it might seem simple on the surface, but I mean, how many hours do you think if you were to just go out today, you have no operations, and you're just going to buy one single family rental, or sorry, short term rental, and do it the way you do today? How many hours a week do you think that would take in terms of ongoing operations?
If you have systems set up in place, you maybe spend 2 hours a week max, right? Maybe three. But if you don't have systems, you could spend five, six, seven, right? So systems in the terms of auto scheduling, pricing tools, property management software. I mean, you don't need a property management software that's super sophisticated for one, but if you just get the one that's made, for fewer properties, that's simpler, that helps automate, right? So if you have the automation, way less. But I used to spend, you know, in a portfolio, I was working 50, 60 hours a week, plus the additional just in the portfolio, plus the additional hours doing the other, I was still fixing flipping in 2018, 19. So I mean you can spend some time if you're building a portfolio and you don't know how to create those systems and build your operations.
And now you're working just as hard to build your management operations as you are the actual real estate portfolio itself, right?
Yeah, we're looking into larger deals. We're doing $10 million plus deals, several of them right now. My wife Mona runs operations of our property management. We're scaling that side. We're potentially buying several more property management companies so that we can scale operations and merge them under one umbrella, right? And then all that goes right along with purchasing because we can partner with a group, right? And at the same time, create a strategic partnership on the front end, come in and help them on the acquisition, on the underwriting side of things, the financing, the projections, and then the execution side and then take over the operations, right? So it all works with each other.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's one of the parts about real estate. It's everybody has to they either learn it too soon or too quickly. But if you want to grow a portfolio, you're also going to have to grow your management operations, regardless of what you're doing. And that's not sexy. That's not why people get into real estate. But if you don't do it, you're just going to end up with a big portfolio that just makes nothing. Um, so, have you ever run into problems where you're just like, man, like before you got to where you are now, when you were growing all this, was there just a point where you're like, man, I don't know if I can keep going at this rate?
2020, I had so many properties, man. I still remember how I felt, right? And COVID hits. Okay. We were going to have the best month. And that for me was like a $70,000 month in gross revenue. And I was like, man, 40 doors, 70,000. I mean, you could do the math, right? Less than $2,000 a door, right? We were projecting 75K, right? And I got hit with COVID. I had a commitment to my staff, my team. I had a large staff, which my staff is about one third of what it was before COVID. And we do more revenue, and our profit is pretty much triple what it was back then because we're doing larger units with larger revenue per purchase versus purchase price or value or rent of the properties, right? So now we only buy, we don't do the rental arbitrage. But I mean, absolutely, Jeff, and it could get a little crazy, right? I almost gave up, but then I went back to my heart. It's like, what do I do, right? So when you're this close to giving up, you just take a little bit of time off and you just realize, what did you get in this for? What is your purpose? What's your long-term vision? And that's when I really, 21 for me was creating my long-term vision. So you know this, you've probably been through COVID, right? When you're in a rock bottom or you get hit so hard, it's hard to get up. You've got to look inside. You've
Yeah,
got to find that fire. And why did you get in this thing, in this business in the first place? Why are you doing this?
right. And that's what gets people through the really tough times because something a lot less important, like, oh, I want to diversify my portfolio or something like that. That's not going to get you through the times where you have your back against the wall and you have to figure it out. For me, the goal has never been about the numbers. It has been, I want to wake up one day and not answer to anybody because I have enough cash flow coming in that I'm set. And there's
Love it.
no other solution out there that will get me there. Every time I've gotten to a point where like, man, I could just get a job and this would be so much easier. I could clock out at 4 and I'd be done for the day. But it's like that doesn't end. That doesn't end. Especially today with inflation, that's hard to look at that and get excited for the future. So for me, that has got me through all the tough times. And now I've been doing it so long, I don't think I'm employable. It's like I would be the worst employee in the world because as an entrepreneur, I'm just going to go
Me
do
too.
something. I'm not going to ask questions.
Yeah. Me too, man. Me too.
Nice. So, what is the ideal, like, let's say you're going to go out and buy one Airbnb property. What is like the ideal setup that you look for?
Ideal setup. So you want me to break down, so our buy box, and
Yeah,
then
like
or
if
you were
is it
just
a
asking for
single
setup.
family house, apartments,
Okay.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So ideal setup depends on the market, but let me just say, um, let's call it Texas, right? So Texas, if we wanted to do the perfect project, and we are, right? I would probably hit, somewhere around two major cities. Okay, so where are there two major cities? Well, you've got the triangle, right? So you've got Dallas up there, you got Austin, San Antonio, and Houston. Well, what cities are closest to each other, right? I will go look around Austin or Dallas because there's Dallas and Waco, right? And then I would find a larger property. Right now, the choice, the buy box here is for what our appetite is, but everybody's appetite, every investor's appetite is different. Every risk profile is different. So for us, we have two different buy box. One is that $500,000 house in the city metro markets or in the in the mountains, rivers, but that's a little bit harder, right? We want to get a property that's 25 to 3,500 square foot with a large backyard, already has pools and hot tubs in Texas, right? And then same thing for the other buy box. But let me kind of break down this one first, right? And then you want to go in there and have this property already be updated. For me, I rather because I'm investing for cash flow, right? Not that we don't do renovations and value adds, we do, but ideally that requires me to put in twice as much work when creating this asset. We have a team that does all of that, but I want to go out there and find a property that's ready to go or almost ready to go, just needs a few tweaks, right? Little paint, little upgrades of fixtures, water or electrical fixtures, and maybe get some meat on the bone, but almost ready, large backyard, add the amenities, at the sports courts, the hot tubs, the playgrounds, and then the tree houses, whatever it is that we want to add out there. Our goal is to create like a mini resort for each property so that people can create those experiences within the property itself, and they don't have to try to go find the water park 10 miles down the road, or they don't need to go to the gym or a sports center to go try to play pickleball or sports. Like, they have everything they need in that property to create these experiences. Right? So that's our goal in both of our buy boxes. The second buy box, it's an even bigger play, 800 to 1.3 million dollar houses, large, 4 to 5,000 square feet, square footage in the inside, acre, maybe 1 to 2 acres minimum. And these are mega properties, not mega real estate. We're just talking about 800 to 1.3, so they are, a little bit riskier than the first one, the first type of buy box or investment strategy, right? And then do the same thing, but on steroids that we did on the first one, right? So, and then usually we target properties based on those buy box aesthetics or specs, and our goal is to generate $300 to $350,000 per property in net, $80 to $120,000 each, right? Those require more work because you're going to be out in different areas. You can't hit those numbers just anywhere. Um, our initial buy box, you can hit 100 to 120 pretty much anywhere if you do the right thing. Any city, that's more normal, right? But you can't hit the 300,000 revenue unless you do specific things that are much harder, take more time. There's a lot more capex, more amenity additions, build outs, so it requires, it's kind of like doing a full renovation, but on the outside. So, and think of, hey, I'm gonna just make this outside, and I'm gonna make this a mini resort, right? And the inside is already done, so it's the same thing, but on the outside.
Nice. It makes sense. So the people are going there, they don't have to worry about anything else. You don't have to be in close proximity to attractions. It is the attraction, more or less.
The property becomes the attraction. Absolutely right. And what attracts them is those emotional hits, right? They're going to see themselves being at a property. So we do lifestyle photography with people in the photos. Not we're switching completely to that. So some of my properties don't have them, but we've got lifestyle shoots coming up next week in some of our properties, and we have another project in Orcas Island that we're doing that will have families and people just hanging out outside. So that's the emotional hit people love. That's just marketing 101, right? So people get emotionally connected to a property, and then they look at the other ones, they're not emotionally connected because the marketing wasn't done right? So marketing is emotional connection.
Are you typically buying this from somebody who's just a homeowner, right? They're not Airbnb this as well. They're just living in it.
We do a lot of creative finance. So we've done tens of dozens of creative finance deals, and that is specifically buying properties subject to their mortgage, leaving the mortgage in the seller's name when they need to get out. We've done a ton of those. Right now, we're partnering with different groups. that already have um, these properties as short-term rentals, and then they're just not performing because they're missing all these things that I told you, and they're missing because you as an operator, you don't know because the data, you don't know how to understand the data, right? So experience has taught me to understand data better. So now we're partnering with operators. We are buying a portfolio from another investor that he had some of it turned as short-term rentals, and this is the St. Louis portfolio I mentioned to you during our off the grid call. And some of them will come, yes, from homeowners, but we've done that so much and it's not so scalable, that we only do that now for either properties that are close to home, Houston, or properties that are going to be in that second buy box.
I got to imagine it's a difficult asset to get data for. I mean, I'm sure I know there's like Air DNA that's come out and some stuff like that, but how big of an advantage is it for you to buy something in an area you already operate and you just instinctively know how much you can get or how occupied you'll be or what your seasonality will be because you're operating multiple properties and you see it across the board?
Yeah. Um, to answer that question, I would say data is everything. Okay. I would much rather invest somewhere else, diversify my portfolio because I learned a lesson in 2020 is having too many properties around one area and that area goes down. I don't think we'll have another pandemic in our lifetime. Hopefully not. But I basically got shut down. All my apartments were shut down, and only my suburb properties were working at the time. I only had a handful of them. So I use data to basically quantify and be able to make decisions. And this is two types of data, Jeff. I use quantitative data and I use qualitative data. Quantitative data is what AirDNA gives me. I download all of them and I make charts and comparisons, and I just look at numbers. Qualitative data is what people miss the most. It's probably the hardest thing to tell, right? Because numbers are there, and if you know how to do math and play with spreadsheets, you can figure out the numbers. But the numbers are going to tell you certain truths, and you've got to find the quantitative data to be able to match those numbers with the quality of these properties, which the numbers will not tell you that, right? So there are no tools out there that you can pretty much filter everything, So for me, it's looking at both and be able to make a decision from there. But if I already know the market, like Houston, it's easier for me to invest. I don't have to do as much research. But we're not investing in Houston right now. It's just a little unstable because there are regulations coming in Houston, and just there's just too many short-term rentals. We're still performing well, but it's like the Wild Wild West down here, right? So, and there was I like regulations, but I started in Houston. We've been investing here, and then now we're in Colorado and Washington, and St. Louis, opening up St. Louis pretty soon. So now we're hitting different areas and we understand the data there, right? So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, would you say that's probably one of the biggest risks in this asset class is just that regulations can change because it's not an industry that's been around for 50 years, right? Well, when a lot of the regulations in zoning and town ordinance were passed, short-term rentals, maybe in like vacation towns, like a beach rental or something, maybe they had some stuff prepared, but a lot of these
Mhm.
cities weren't ready for this kind of thing.
Yeah. So regulations in metro areas, let me give you context. There's three major types of short-term rental markets, right? You have your metro markets, you have your drivable vacation rental markets, so these are smaller beach towns or mountain towns that you could drive to, and you have your fly to mega markets. Most of the fly to mega markets are the ones that have all the luxury real estate, right? So those are going to always be the ones that get hit during a recession, right? So then you have drivable and metro. We invest in both, right? So regulations already well established in most drivable vacation rental markets, and so are they in the fly to markets, but not so established in metro markets. So we look for metro and vacation rental markets that you could drive to. and we look for emerging smaller markets, so mid-size, right, to smaller, outside of different, major cities with regulations already in place. So think about it. If a town has already placed their regulations, most likely they won't change them, right? So it's easier and it's de-risked. Well, less risk. I wouldn't say completely risked, but it's way less risk than if you went and you try to invest in Houston and they change it, even though they're not going to do that, right? It's about to be passed, and it's just, you gotta get a license and go by these rules and pay a fee every year, and then yeah, you just can't have a bunch of calls to your home or whatnot from the authorities, or police calls, or neighbors calling. That kind of stuff is what they look for. So does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's one of those weird things where I mean, I live in Colorado, and so there's some towns here who like Breckenridge is one I know. They set
Yeah.
a limit
Love
on
Breckenridge.
how many days a year you can do it, right? And then it's tricky. A lot of these, it's just a newer thing. So a lot of these cities are. I think what it really is they realize there's some tax revenue that they're not collecting, and they're trying to make a license
100%.
process so that they can.
100%. They're missing out.
Yeah.
They're definitely missing out. I've been to Breckenridge. I went there last June, I think. Beautiful, gorgeous, man. So, uh, I need to go back sometime. So
Yeah.
in heaven up there, man.
Yeah, me and my wife got a lot of skiing done last year, so I cannot complain. I cannot complain.
Nice.
But
I
so
love
you
it.
guys are growing a lot, and you're looking at a huge portfolio that you're buying of rental properties. So how are you funding these transactions?
Great question. So, as I mentioned earlier, we buy some properties creative finance. So, this portfolio that we're buying in St. Louis is 75% loan to value, seller finance. Okay.
Wow,
And
awesome.
yeah, and we're partnering with the seller. So,
Wow, awesome.
um, yeah, she's got crews up there, investors, right? And so we partner with him, so he's helping with a lot of we ended up creating a larger partnership with this seller, right? And we pretty much put together a full-fledged execution plan. Some of it with his crews, and our teams come in and take over after the properties. And then the capex has been added to the interiors and exteriors as well, right? To stage and furnish. And we still do some single deals, so we'll take some short-term rental DSCR loans, right? Based on revenue and appraised value. So they look at the revenue first, and then if the ratio is right, the DSCR is right, they'll do an appraisal, and if the appraisal comes back right, then we'll get that 75 or 80% LTV. And then in addition to that, we are also I've set creative finance, I've set seller finance, the SCR loans, and then we're partnering, right? Some of the deals that we're doing right now, it'll be an operator that already has this 3, 4, 5, or 10 properties, right? And his portfolio is underperforming because they're not a short-term rental operator. They are an investor or a syndicator that, had this thing landed and they developed it maybe, and essentially performed for some time, and then things changed the 2 years later, and they didn't know how to pivot. So we're coming in and helping them reposition their entire portfolio by essentially in three phases, right? Creating, looking at their financials and looking at the market and how it's not performing or why it's not performing. Look at the market numbers and the top 10% of properties, and then creating a plan to do that, right? So that we don't have to bring in financing, and we don't have to do all the setup and work. We just have to make it work, right? So that's one way, and we'll partner on larger portfolios, right? 10, I mean, $5 to $10 million, probably the smallest
Gotcha.
value.
So these portfolios, are they mostly small operations, or is it like you're trying to get multiple deals at a time and then just kind of package them when you go to buy it?
So the one in St. Louis, just to be, transparent. It's never been a short-term rental. We looked at that market. We didn't think it was a viable market. And then we started looking at the data a little bit more. We started managing three of those properties, and then we did our thing when it came to design. We didn't go full force. We drastically changed the trajectory of those three properties, increased their performance by 40 to 50% compared to market. And then there's seven other properties in that same portfolio that were managed by another operator. So we passed them by 171%, right? Our performance versus what they're doing, 171, so 71% higher. So it'll be this is an example of what we've done in two markets and how we've entered a market that is we didn't know anything about, right? So that's one way. The other would be, 3, 4 properties so we can open up and build our operations there, which is literally just cleaning teams and maintenance people, right, that are going to be needed. The rest is much easier, right? Like hiring a plumber from Google, it's really easy because you just have to, your team has to call them. So our operations, we're opening up markets. Probably I would say the smallest that we could do is opening up a market with 5 to 7 properties so that we could build a team there, and it's not just a time, sucker per se, right? It's not sucking our time for just one property. So we want to build a team and enter markets one at a time, not do too many of them. But as we build our operations, I would say I'm not going to make the same mistake of growing 50 properties in 1 year with only me and a staff. Now I've got a full operations team, and we are hiring. We just hired another front desk person. We're hiring an assistant, an operations assistant. As you go, we add, maybe I would say 3, 4 properties a quarter, maybe 5. And that comes in chunks. So that way we're not just slamming everybody in our team.
Right. Right. So you've even managed, if I heard that right, you've managed properties in a market to get a feel on how the market operates and get an idea of like the on the ground demand.
So yeah, this operator needed management. So we went and stood up the properties, right? Set them up. And we did it our way with the limited budget. So we didn't really go all out on the backyards like we usually do. Right. And then from there, we saw performance that created confidence for us to be able to go into a market with very little data and buy an 18 property portfolio with 24 units that is going to create $3 million in short-term rental revenue per year. Right. So before we did all that, we went to test the market because sometimes there's no data, zero or very little. So it's like without data, it's hard to make decisions. So your quantitative decision brain, left brain, it's just going to say, oh my God, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. You don't want to put your partners and investors at risk. So, and then you look at the quality. So there's just, if there's neither, it's harder. So we had to test. And that's how we entered the St. Louis market.
That's super smart. Like that is incredibly strategic. So that's a really cool advantage you have to have a team that can go in there. What is your team up to now? Like how many people are on your team in total?
So both between our partners and my partner, operating partner, and myself, we have 2 separate property management companies. We both total manage about 80 doors across 25 or 26 markets in like 8 states now, right? So, and that's not even counting remaining St. Louis properties, right? So his team is got more people on the team. So total between both of us, we have about 5 or 6 operations, asset managers, market managers, and then front desk, and then the vendors. I think he's got maybe 7 or 8. So yeah, it's growing pains. It's not the easiest thing to build property management companies, but we know the systems and the entire build out of the operations because I've personally done all of this for many, many years. So now I just coach the team on our weekly meetings, right? And they make the decisions. My wife I've taught her everything I know, right? And now she's better than me when it comes to just knowing the nitty-gritty things. So that's our deal, right? So it takes a little bit of time to be able to
Gotcha.
build it on, scale it all up. But we love it,
Awesome.
right? We're going to be buying property management companies this year too, so hopefully we can knock out one or two, and in different areas. So we'll have, western, south, north, east coast. So
Man, I can't wait to see it. I want to touch base in a year and see how many different states you're in. I'm sure it's going to be an insane growth.
thank you. Yeah, it's smart growth, smart scaling. You know, I recently listened to a podcast about a book called Smart Scaling. That's not what I did before. Smart scaling is the way to go now. The lesson
Nice.
learned, right?
Smart scaling. I got to
Yeah,
read that
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Well, perfect. Well, before we jump off, is there anything, if people want to get a hold of you, right? They say, man, this sounds awesome. I'd love to get involved. What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Simple. My website is George Salas 360 .com. You can download a masterclass that I have in there that talks about all this also, right? And then my social medias are there, and then if you guys want to take a look at the portfolio, it's empresscapitalgroup.com or empressvacationrentals.com. So
Perfect. And we'll
yeah,
link that below so people can just go right on there and click. Awesome. Well, George, I appreciate it. I
thank you.
learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else listening, is going to learn a lot too. It's a fascinating business you have. And when I go to Texas, you guys have stuff in Austin?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I
Yeah.
got some brother-in-laws in Austin, so next time I'm down there, I want to stay in one of them. But I got some
Yeah,
family
man.
in Houston too, so I'll hit you up.
Yeah. When you come to Houston, I'll see you here, brother.
Awesome.
All right.
Well,
Thanks for
thanks,
having
George.
me.
I
Yes, sir.
appreciate it.